Welcome, leaders, teams, and those ready to take charge of their energy. It's Kelly Bubolz, your guide in workforce energy management. Burnout is not just a buzzword, it's a symptom of deeper root cause stressors. We're here to stop waiting for the change and start leading it. It's time to reclaim our energy and lead our days with intention and purpose. Today's webinar is going to be focused on developing talent from within. Sometimes we disregard that because it can seem like a lot more work than just hiring from the outside. But when you start to forget about your top talent, your skill sets that aren't even tapped into yet within your internal team, you're giving them one option: to disengage, to leave. So when we talk about retention, when we talk about team motivation, we also want to be talking about how are we developing our team from within. So we're going to go through 3 strategies that you can begin to use within your team, and you don't have to own it all. I'm talking to you leaders, I'm talking to you HR, that you don't have to be the driving force in these strategies. So why we want to do internal development is that's how you get retention. That's how you get engagement and natural motivation. You can already see the shift in behavior that people want change within their positions within that 1 to 2 year time frame. And that might seem really fast, but when you look at people's resumes when you're recruiting, you see that they're switching about every 2 or 3 years. So after that first year time frame where they really grabbed onto their position, they learned about the flow, the skill set within their operation, how they're going to provide value, you want to now start to develop them into the next thing. Now, traditionally, I've been talking about workforce energy management, moving away from this traditional ways of working. The traditional way is you move from this position to this position, or you move from this position to the leader of that position. It's very cut and dry, right? Black and white. But that's actually not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, what does these positions actually look like? Do you have different levels, right? So you could have maybe a technical or an engineering person. They do the day-to-day, they're doing the dig-intos, the research, and then you could have a project manager of that type of work. You could have someone that's more customer focused. You could have someone that's more focused on systems and processes. So I want you to kind of keep an open mind as we go through these strategies, because when I say you should be switching people about every 2 years, those that want to, those that have that type of drive for change, I'm not talking about complete position overhauls, complete department switches. I'm talking about, what does it look like in the future? Do you have them move into a more process type role, but still within that same position? Do you have them move into a more project or people or customer type of function within that role? Do you have them be the leader of the system because that department owns that system? Do you see that the role has been modified or expanded on, but you're not completely switching departments? So there's different ways to do this, but we do know that energy begins to leak when employees don't see a pathway forward, when they're getting stagnant in their position or not challenged enough. And as you've heard in other videos and out on social media, I'm talking about flow state a lot, and that's where their skill set meets the right amount of challenge. So we want to keep them in that sweet spot, which means they have to have continual challenges within their reach. And that's what we're talking about here when we talk about developing talent within, is how do we keep expanding their skill set, keeping them engaged, while also not burning ourselves out in the process of all this development. Now, why we want to be proactive is you want to start to link this development of talent to business cycles, to business growth strategies. Oftentimes we talk about developing people because someone left, and here's the next person in line. Here's the next best thing. And that's very reactive. And it can be an abrupt shift that causes disruption across your organization, across your team members. So when you're talking about workforce planning, that's exactly what it is. It's, what do we look like in 1 year, and what do we need in our talent, in our teams to get there? And who is the best fit? Let's begin those discussions. Nothing should be a surprise. Here's our business strategy. Guess who's executing it? Your workforce. So let's begin planning. So I want you to start switching into that proactive mode, which means you have to give dedicated intentional time to do that, leading them to where you want to go, versus being this reactive of, this person leaves, now we have a crisis, so let's just fill the position. How we're going to do that is in these three strategies. And why I love these three strategies is it can be applied across industries. It can be applied in small business, in large business, and it's practical. I've been in enough strategy and consultant type of meetings, my 20 years in HR, to know that sometimes it's just a lot of talk and not a lot of action. And by the time we get to the action point, people have left because we have not communicated or rolled out the development plan. So I'm going to tell some stories through this, and you're going to see kind of where the workforce planning was broken and where we can make it better. So the first strategy I want to talk about is DISC behavioral science, job matching. So when you talk about energy, are people actually aligned with the work that they do? And here's what I'm talking about. There are work styles. There are motivational factors in human behavior that align to one job or another. For example, our Ds, our dominance, our Is, our influence, they're fast-paced. They're active. They actually thrive in change, right? So right now with all this change, they're kind of like loving the ride right now, but they're not liking the environment because the environment's not moving fast enough or giving enough support to keep the team along. And then on the opposite side, support of our S's and our C's, compliance, they're a little bit methodical, more slow paced because they want to dig into the data, the details, the next steps. They're a little more careful. They want to de-risk before they move. Do you see where some of the misalignments already happening within your organization when you assign people to jobs? When we interview people, we're interviewing them on their education, maybe some of their experience. Maybe you ask for some examples in the really good interviews, and you're not really asking about their work style. So say if I'm a company and we are in a high change moment, and in the next 5 years, we're going to have big growth, so a lot of change happening, methodical and careful type of work styles are going to have a harder time with that change. So is it still a good fit for your organization? Maybe, depending on the factors, but you also want them in a position where they're not going to lead the change because they're going to be extra careful and de-risk all the time that you're going to get kind of this drag in your change management process and plan that you wanted to roll out. On the opposite side, maybe a D or I type of leader that has understanding of other work styles is going to be better for leading that change. Here's another great example where we actually had some misalignment. So we had some salespeople, and they were really good at what they did, but we weren't getting new business. And then we did DISC behavioral science, and we found out most of our salespeople were S and C's. They were methodical, careful. They were really good at client relationships and supporting them. There was no complaints of our current customers, but there wasn't new customers. And what we found out is we had different type of sales roles. We just labeled it as sales, but really there was two types of sales roles. We had the road warriors, the people that want to hunt. They love the thrill of getting new business and hitting those goals. And then we had people, which you in the sales world called farmers, which means they love the client relationships and stopping in to see how things are going, seeing where they can expand their services. They love the customer service part of that, getting into the data and details of the rollout of things. Two very different work styles. Now imagine if you didn't have DISC work styles and understand their behaviors, misplacing when you hire, when you transfer people internally into that sales team. If you put someone who's slow and methodical into a road warrior, hunter type of sales role, you're setting them up to fail. They don't work like that. They're very successful at the farming, but the hunting thing is not their thing. Vice versa. If you have a hunter, someone who has some drive, some thrive, they love to change a lot, but they don't want to dig into the data and details and actual execution of their service, they won't like the farming, right? Because that's where the data, the details, the customer service, the client relationship building is. So when you can align people within the right role and their work style, they naturally have this motivation. They naturally thrive in these type of environments. So do you actually know your team when you're trying to develop them? Sometimes people just want to go into a role because they saw someone else go into it and they had a pretty successful time in it. Or sometimes they just want to get off the plant floor. We had that in our environment. Their bodies were getting older and wear and tear on it. They're like, I can't do this forever. I want an office job. Okay, well, what do you want, right? And they don't really know what they want. So disc behavioral science will help you align the job to the work style and finding those natural motivators. Now, let's talk about the second strategy, and this is going to be kind of a mindset shift. And this is where I highly suggest connecting me with your leadership team, because it helps when it's a third-party facilitator of the conversation versus the HR person or one leader having this conversation, and that's who owns what. A weird concept, right? But who does own what? Because oftentimes internal team development and developing a team from within falls on human resources. But human resources is the enabler, which means they're going to set up environments that people can grow into pathways. They're going to set up and facilitate certain meetings of succession planning. And here's where we need to go. Here's the gaps in our teams. They might even set up the vendor or the system in which performance management is going to happen. So they're the enabler. That means there's two other roles that need to happen. The other is leaders are the coach. So HR is going to set up the environment, right? They're going to set up the meetings. They're going to set up the systems. They're going to identify some pathways, maybe because they have the whole organizational view. The leaders are the coach then. Their goal is to remove the obstacles, both in the team, in the process, in the workflow, and in the individual. But we forget that leaders are the coach, and we bog them down with tasks and checklists, and they have to do a million things. So the last thing in line is people. So when you move leaders into the coach, it provides value to the third person that's involved, and that's the employee. That means the employee is hiking this path. The employee is driving this forward. Have you ever had a development situation internally in your organization and the company owned more of it than the employee? The company set up the systems, the pathway, what they need to do to get there, and then the employee didn't do their part. And sometimes it's because it wasn't clear. Sometimes it's because things changed within that and we didn't have a conversation about what we need to reroute. What does this look like? This person still has not retired. You said I would have this position when he retired, right? And now it's delayed. We're not providing that clarity on their pathway. So I want you to split it into threes. Who owns what? HR is the enabler. They're going to set up the environment so that internal development can happen. They're going to set up that training, that meeting facilitation, some pathways to go through. But guess what? They don't own everything. The leaders are going to coach the person from there. They are going to select a pathway with the employee and coach them to get them to the next trail point. The employee, therefore, is the hiker. They need to put on the pack, get their hands a little dirty, and take it forward. If the employee's not going to own it, if the leadership's not going to be the coach, this is where the clunky stuff starts to happen. This is why HR is burning out, because they're carrying a load that they shouldn't. HR is going to set up the pathway. They're going to put the trail marks along the way. Leaders are going to be the coach, right? They're going to talk about some things that they put in their pack that wasn't needed, things that they wish they had in their pack, right? They're going to coach them through it. And then the employee is going to be the hiker. And they need to actually take the steps down this path. Do you see the different energy shift that just created? Because the whole group owns this transition. Now, that brings me to building this framework. You don't just create this framework. It comes down to increasing clarity. Do we know the paths within our organizations and what that looks like in the future? Like I said, positions won't look the same. Is it not just this position, but this position and process, this position and now you own the system, this position and you own these initiatives, right? So you could be like the project manager. What does it look like? So clarity. Is everyone aligned with that? Communication. I've had many resonations throughout my HR career in which someone says, there's just no place for me here, or I've outgrown my role. And I'm like, well, did your leader tell you about these opportunities? No. or we didn't tell them about these opportunities because we haven't even aligned enough around it to communicate it out. So communication's huge in this. Is people are looking for answers, for clarity. Do you have it? Are you giving it? So clarity, communication, trust. How many times do people say, I want this in writing? Is that a great practice legally? Yes. But why it's there is because people have gotten screwed over. So trust. If you say you're going to do something, then do it. Say what you do what you say when you said you were going to do it, right? So trust. And then the fourth is workflow. And this really comes down to systems, process flow, the getting rid of the clunkiness of the pass-offs of this type of information and when things are going to happen, the transactions of it. We were in a large organization internationally, and they had a performance management system that was internationally, and it did not fit us here in North America and how we operated. So it was clunky. No one signed into it. And so when we tried to do internal development through the system, no one wanted to use it. And we had all these other systems that it wasn't integrated into. So to do performance management internally to develop your team was such a hassle. So guess what? People didn't want to do it. So can you make it easy? If you make performance management easy, if you could make internal development easy and there's still a good flow, there's still a good system, people will use the system. So when you have too many multi-systems or they're difficult, again, this is where the clunkiness in the process start to take place. So who owns what is second? Now, the third one I want to talk about is, are you having this conversation once a year? Or are you having this continually? If you have the three players up to bat, HR as the enabler, leaders as the coach, and the employee as the hiker, right? They're driving it forward. It's going to be a more frequent real-time type of feedback system versus, hey, he's been trying this for 6 months. It's not working. What? 6 months have went by. So much time has passed that we could have fixed it or maybe pulled him back to his other position if it wasn't working. So are you having really good value add one-on-one questions? Now, out on my website is a few toolkits for instant download. I want to show you one of them. This is in the Workforce Energy Toolkit, and there's different things about meeting agendas and some time management, productivity tips in there. But then there's also some value add questions, value add for your department meetings, value add for your individual meetings. And this is going to get down to some of these questions that employees might not recognize that they need to ask themselves on this path of development within your company, and giving time to value add questions like one a meeting, right? We don't want to bog people down with these deep questions, but maybe one a meeting is going to not only increase that communication, that trust, clean up some of those workflows, but it's going to get people to identify where they want to go. So, for example, one towards the bottom of the sheet here is, what does genuine appreciation look like to you? Now, let me ask you, if someone asked you that in a meeting when you were on a path of internal development within your team, wouldn't that help you realign with what you need? Or say I'm on a path to a certain sales role, and I know the sales manager is not aligned with my type of work style, and they asked me that question, what does genuine appreciation look like to you? Maybe that role is not a good fit for me. I already recognize me and the manager are going to be misaligned, but that genuine appreciation, these are value add questions. This is what drives people. This is what drives their behavior. So now I know, oh, yeah, that's going to be misaligned. Maybe this isn't a good internal path within the organization. Or, for example, I'm meeting with an employee, I'm their leader, and I want to start exploring where they want to go over the next year, right? They're a new hire. They've been here for about a year. We're ready for the next step. Here's a great question. What type of communication works best for you? So we're going to start their path, their internal development. What type of communication works best for you? When I ask that question as their direct leader, I'm going to know, what do they need on this journey? Some people are direct email. right? They're independent. Some people, they need accountability. Hey, every one-on-one, I want us to check in on this development goal to make sure I'm driving forward. Maybe they like the data and details, so they want more information to de-risk the situation. Hey, can I sit with so-and-so and shadow them for the day? So what type of communication works for you gets into some of those deeper needs that we kind of just assume everyone is like us. And it gets us to pause and start asking those value add questions. So this is the Workforce Energy Toolkit, available on my website for instant download. Lots of great sheets on there to help you not with productivity, but engaging that energy again while preventing burnout. So that's the whole goal of these toolkits available on my website. So we talked about DISC job matching. If you don't have DISC behavioral science in your organization, contact me and we can have a meeting of what that looks like for your organization. I want you to have a conversation about who owns what. And again, you can use me as the catalyst shift for change in your organization. Say, hey, I went to this webinar on developing team from within with Kelly Bubolz, and she talked about who owns what, and she talked about HR as the enabler, leaders as the coach, and the employee as the main hiker driving it forward. What does that look like in our organization, right? Use me. I would love that. Bring my name up. Let's drive some change. So that's the second one. Who owns what? And the third one is these micro development moments. Are you having the conversations that they actually need on these paths? And what does their role actually look like that can be aligned and motivational and engage that energy that might not look like what it is today? So we went through the toolkits. We went through DISC. When you are applying, developing your team within, just know that there needs to be a plan, right? We need some clarity around it. Everyone's aligned with the plan. We need some communication. And then the consistency within that's going to build the trust. And then we need a good workflow to make sure that we're not losing people along the way. And when in doubt, back up and ask yourself, if everyone owned something of this development pathway, of this team development, if it was clear, if it was communicated well, if we had enough trust in this to move it forward, what would work feel like every day when you come in? What would it look like? And that's the mindset shift I want you to have, is this can be designed. All you have to do is lead the change. Today's step matters. It's in the micro moments that real change begins. Managing your energy isn't about shame, blame, or disrupting your lifestyle. It's about the small, intentional choices to reclaim that natural energy. If this episode hit the mark for you, share with others. This journey doesn't have to be lost and lonely, but exciting and full of new paths. See you back here to continue the adventure.